So this one's a little different. So I know that this is episode 5 and we typically have like an intro and stuff, but we just did 2 episodes of the Mooncast, and we're doing this a little bit out of order here, but we had a lot of tequila today, and now we moved on to High West bourbon. So we're gonna try it out, and let me know what you think.
Yeah, and we were just talking in between episodes here about some of the stuff we were just talking about with the moon, some of the theories, and it led us into talking about some of the apocalypse, things that could happen, nuclear apocalypse, and we started talking about one of our favorite shows, Silo. So we started thinking about what would happen if we got to that point.
Yeah. Well, before we do that, though, cheers.
Cheers.
Sweet. And as I said, we're drinking High West, and this is a single barrel. Yeah.
Cask strength.
Cask strength.
Single barrel.
All right. Yeah, it's pretty.
Pick for party liquors.
That Kentucky Hug is real.
Yeah, it's strong on this one.
It's pretty strong. But so Charlie over here, he's had the rye version of High West and wasn't really a big fan. Me, I've had pretty much every single one, but I was so hammered when I was having all of the High West whiskeys, the bourbons, and this was in Salt Lake City, and I don't remember it. So, this is pretty good.
It is.
I got this as a Christmas present, and it's pretty damn good. Anyway, all to say that in this show Silo, and I know that some of you have seen it, some of you have not, and I actually had to read the book after I watched the first season of it because I needed to know what happened next. And what's interesting about it is, so both Charlie and I are Fallout fans. Like, we love Fallout, the video game, and it is an interesting demonstration of what could potentially happen in a nuclear fallout situation, where it's just like, things are radiated, like things are deformed, or people are deformed, or even animals and all that stuff, and it's all a story of survival. And this relates to the moon and some of the things that we're doing external to the Earth, as to how we would survive past a fallout event. Like, would that be an accurate characterization?
Yeah, I mean, if there is a fallout event, an Armageddon event on this planet, what do we do? Is that why we're so adamant on getting to Mars? Is that why Elon is putting together this plan to get to Mars? He hasn't talked about going to any other planet. He talks about Mars. Mm-hmm. Which, side note, Elon may be a Martian. He's definitely highly intelligent and just weird enough that he could be a Martian.
Or a hybrid.
Yeah. So he could be trying to get us there because he knows this fallout Armageddon event is coming. And what do we do on this planet if there is an Armageddon and a fallout event that wipes out the inhabitability? I think that's a word. Sounds good after a shit ton of alcohol.
Yeah.
What do we do to keep moving forward as a species?
Well, I mean, do we go underground? Like, do we leave the Earth? Like, I mean, you hear these stories about people creating nuclear bunkers or fallout bunkers and everything, and being able to survive underground for a given amount of time. I mean, is that enough?
Maybe. Most bunkers are theoretical.
Yes. I mean,
I think the government bunkers that are
Yeah.
deep in mountains, that I don't believe are too theoretical.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people have built their own bunkers are theoretical based upon the information that we have, the scientific data we have about nuclear fallout. Mm-hmm. So if this were to happen, honestly, I think a majority of mankind is wiped out. what's left over, a majority of mankind, is going to have to go underground. Where else do you go? I think there's only a certain number of people who can go to another planet. Even if Elon figures it out in the next, let's say, 5 years, he gets it figured out, this is how we can inhabit Mars. And we have an event. Who in reality is going to Mars? I'm not going. I'm not going to get selected. Why the fuck would they select me?
Mm-hmm.
What value would I bring to the elite that are going to be on that ship going to Mars? I don't. You've seen movies and read books where it's always a specific type of person who gets chosen to be the ones who survive. It tends to be the rich, that top 1% of the world. Maybe they select the best chemist in their field, the best scientists in this field. I don't think I'm in those categories.
No, but I think that there should be a bit of a lottery where it's just like, the best normal person, or probably the worst, depending on who is actually eligible for some lottery or whatever, should be able to go, because you need someone to level out like a linear way of thinking, like at the 1%, to where it's just like, standing from the outside, someone that is just a dude that grew up in the middle class or even lower class or something, maybe you should consider this. And I think that's pretty good feedback, because you need different ways of thought to be successful in the future.
I just don't think a lottery system would happen.
Why not?
I just think it would be rigged towards the people who buy their way onto that proverbial lifeboat to go to Mars.
Okay.
And the rest of us, we are going to have to figure it out. We're going to have to go into underground bunkers and hope they work. We're going to have to go into silos, per se. We're going to have to build these silos that go 200 stories underground to keep us safe from whatever fallout happens.
Okay.
Getting off the planet, I don't think it's feasible for a majority of humans. Then again, I feel like a majority of humans die immediately. If there was a nuclear fallout, if it was a nuclear war, I think 90% of humans are done immediately.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's more than 10% that would survive a nuclear war. If it was nuclear facilities, power plants that failed, I think that number's higher. But there would have to be a quick decision on what we're doing and how far away from that fallout do you have to be, and how deep do you have to get in the ground to survive, and how do you survive in the ground, and how long do you have to stay under there.
Mm-hmm. Again, this is all theoretical.
It is.
It's, if this were to happen, based off of everything that we know, this is what you need to protect yourself. And I just don't believe that there is enough evidence until we're in the situation to be able to support, like, this is, we're going to make it or we're not going to make it. And I just, maybe there is a program that is very similar to, the Fallout video games. Maybe, maybe the Fallout games are more than just entertainment, and it's more a psyop to be able to get the public to believe that there is options out there for, being able to survive some sort of event like this. And I could have believed it when we used to have to hide under our desks in case of nuclear attack. I mean, what was that going to do? Really nothing, honestly. Mm-hmm. It's just debris wasn't going to fall on you or whatever, but like the fallout event or the pieces of what it would entail to be in that type of nuclear event, you wouldn't be protected by a wooden desk for sure. So Yeah, I always thought that it would be interesting to learn how we would react to that type of event. And, I think that sci-fi is probably the closest that we would get in terms of what it would theoretically be like if we were in that type of situation.
I mean, if you look at Chernobyl,
Mm-hmm.
how long ago did that happen? 84,
80 some at some point. Yeah.
86, I think. So
Yeah.
we're on almost 40 years still uninhabitable.
Sure.
So, like, how long would it take if something like that happened through nuclear war or nuclear um, failure at a power plant? Would it take us out of the equation? Like, we wouldn't be able to use that land. And we have several nuclear power plants throughout the United States, and there's multiple around the world, hundreds of them. What would that do to us? How long does it take? So, looking at a couple things. So, they say most radioactive fallout is extremely hazardous for the first 24 to 48 hours. I think the people of Chernobyl may disagree with that because it was pretty bad for weeks.
Yeah.
Um,
You ever seen the movie, or not the movie, the series Chernobyl?
yeah,
Yeah, dude, that's nuts. And
yeah. It wasn't. 24 to 40 hours straight fucking chaos.
yeah, I mean, you had people on the roof that were just like grabbing pieces of like molten radioactive material and just throwing it to like throwing it off the
Yeah.
roof or whatever with like their own hands. Like, I mean, these people died weeks later. It's crazy.
Yeah. So you're still getting a lot of fallout
Mm-hmm.
weeks later. They're saying that with fallout from a radiation um, plant from a nuclear facility, 80 to 90% of the radiation decays about 2 weeks later.
Okay.
Why if that's the case, like what the fuck's going on in Chernobyl 40 years later that we haven't cleaned it up? That makes you wonder if, like, I mean, obviously a nuclear blast, it's that blast from a nuclear missile that wipes out everything for miles.
Mm-hmm.
So you've lost all of New York City, per se.
But that's all due to the overpressure, the shrapnel. and all
Correct.
that
There's a
stuff.
lot of stuff to going into that.
Mhm.
But you're wiped out
Mhm.
for miles.
Sure.
The fallout after that, they're saying if 80 to 90% of that radioactive radiation decays over the first couple weeks, so you're going to have fucked up people on the outskirts of that blast forever. Anybody who was in that blast radius with the radiation, you got radiation poisoning.
Mm-hmm.
They say a lot of isotopes will break down 1 to 5 years, but they still remain hazardous. So, how do you get 40 years from Chernobyl happening? Was it leaking past the time that we thought it was leaking?
Mm-hmm.
Is that why 40 years later? I mean, in Japan, that would make sense. That was leaking for a long time afterwards, possibly still leaking. So,
But here's what I don't understand. So, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we detonated nuclear bombs in both of those cities. Okay, all right.
wasn't it atomic?
These are atomic bombs.
Okay.
In 1945 during World War II, and there's been a lot of reconstruction and all that stuff. And what's interesting is that Hiroshima has a population of 1.1 million people today. There's a memorial and all that stuff, and there's a lot that has happened in terms of like the people that were there at the time that they did develop some symptoms from the atomic bomb. And then you also have Nagasaki, which actually has a population of about 400,000 people today, and there is a lot of preservation, and there's also a peace park there, where they also have an atomic bomb museum and all this stuff. But what I'm trying to get at here is these are both atomic bombs, lots of radiation that were included within these atomic bombs, but there is no lingering harmful radiation in both of these cities within Japan, and the radiation levels in both of these cities return to normal background levels shortly after the bombings.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, here we're pulling a thread on another conspiracy here, where it's just like, what is the difference between the yield of an atomic bomb and a nuclear power facility like Chernobyl that is way more harmful in terms of lasting effects, whereas now I can buy a house in Hiroshima today and be fine. Like the radiation levels are totally fine. You can live there. So it's like, is there a conspiracy in the fallout of a particular place that has been exposed to high levels of radiation? I thought that it was uninhabitable if you were to use nuclear or atomic weapons. Is there a difference between a nuclear weapon and an atomic weapon?
There is, I think.
There is?
And you can search this if you want, but I think nuclear uses plutonium.
Okay.
Plutonium is the problem. Plutonium, I'm going to guess on this because I don't know the exact, but I believe plutonium has a half-life of somewhere around 20,000 or more years. So
it's a half-life.
Yeah. So if it has around 20,000 years, depending upon the amount of plutonium, that could make the area unsafe for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. Maybe that's why Chernobyl is not inhabitable now and may never be inhabitable. I mean, what if Chernobyl 1,000 years from now is still not inhabitable just from one nuclear power plant fuck up?
Yeah. But see, here's the thing. So when it comes to, they're kind of used interchangeably when it comes to atomic and nuclear weapons, and they may or may not mean the same thing. It just depends on who's talking about it. But in terms of the actual facts, so fission weapons are atomic bombs, and they use just nuclear fission alone. And fusion weapons, which are hydrogen bombs, and they use nuclear fission, which is basically fusing light nuclei like hydrogen isotopes into helium to release the energy. So fusion weapons are usually a lot stronger in terms of the yield or the potential damage. And you know, from a power standpoint, thermonuclear weapons are way more powerful than atomic bombs. And atomic bombs is what we used before. And they're capable of releasing energy equivalent to millions of tons of TNT, which is essentially the measure of megatons and stuff in terms of range and stuff.
And we've never truly detonated a nuclear bomb.
Well, in testing, I think
testing,
we have.
But not in a city.
No.
So we don't truly know that yet. And God, hopefully we never know, because that'll be fucking massive. But what I'm seeing is, for like Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the reason that they were able to be inhabited so quickly was we had airbursts, which produced less lingering fallout than ground detonations.
So it would penetrate the ground, and then it would actually soak into the ground.
Correct. Yeah, okay. is what I see with Chernobyl and Fukushima. Fukushima was in the water, so they're saying now, because that happened 2010, 2011. They're saying now there's areas that are reopened, that were evacuated, but there are hotspots that remain.
Well,
how bad is it in those hotspots, though?
Sure. But let's talk about that for a second. So, okay, so first, surface level. So atomic bombs, right?
Yeah.
Surface level atomic bombs. wouldn't that be Chernobyl? Because that is a surface level event.
But I believe those facilities go fairly deep into the ground.
Not really.
No, I believe they do. If you look at nuclear facilities, they're not just on the land; they dig into the ground to build those. I mean, we're going to research this on the fly, guys, while we're talking about this. But here's something else that I just researched. So with any type of nuclear fallout, depending upon the decontamination that you do, most land can be inhibited 1 to 10 years later. So in '86, when Chernobyl had their disaster, we didn't know how to decontaminate the land, so it absorbed everywhere. Maybe that's why 40 years later it's still all fucked up.
Yeah.
You got six-eyed fish. You got three-headed
Because it alters DNA.
deer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's gonna be some fucked up stuff out there.
Well, it turns out that the Chernobyl nuclear power plant did not extend very deep underground.
Really?
Most of its critical structures were built above ground.
Huh.
So that's where it's just like it kind of baffles me that incident, yeah, it was an explosion and it was a lot of operator error, and a lot of that went into it. But like, I don't understand what the difference is between the disaster that happened on Chernobyl, where the people can't live there anymore, and then we had to create, or humans had to create, a cover over it to be able to reduce the amount of nuclear fallout or half-life that was exposed to the external environment. But then people are thriving in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and you can buy a house there today and be totally fine. But yeah, sure, like, and that's the other thing that I don't understand is sensors weren't the same as they are today. Whereas like today, you can have a ground penetrating sensor or be able to penetrate the ground, or even be able to explode a munition above ground at a specific level based off of real-time radar. Yeah, I can believe that today. But back then, like when we first introduced the atomic bomb, I don't believe we had those types of sensors. We had heat-seeking missiles. I don't even think we had that.
I think we did.
We did?
I think it comes down to plutonium.
Okay.
Plutonium is lethal. So atomic bombs did not, I don't think they used plutonium. Nuclear facilities and nuclear bombs use plutonium. That's the bad one. I think that's what makes everything uninhabitable.
So there's plutonium and there's uranium.
Correct.
Okay.
And plutonium has that 20,000 year half-life. So that could render shit, if you don't decontaminate it immediately and properly, and depending upon the amount of exposure, could last you hundreds to thousands of years. In Chernobyl in particular, and we've joked about this before, is we have Homer Simpson running the nuclear power plants. Chernobyl in particular had design flaws, and then a lot of human error occurred, which, if you've read anything on it and you saw that documentary on HBO, they talked about how there was a lot of human error. They don't talk about design flaws. They just talk about the human error aspect, how shit went sideways and we didn't know how to stop it. That's only part of the story. There was no containment structures there. So without a containment structure, you're kind of fucked. Just that alone will fuck over your nuclear power plant. I don't know what Fukushima, or even the one here. We have one here in Florida.
Yeah,
maybe more than one.
It's Turkey Point in Miami.
I don't know what their containment structure looks like, but there was none at Chernobyl. So when shit went sideways, they were fucked.
Yeah.
There was coolant water that turns into steam there. the power output could spike instead of stabilizing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a problem. But you can't if you can't contain the nuclear material, you're screwed. And we know human error. That was the biggest thing everybody wants to blame it on. But if you have design flaws and then you add in human error, you're fucked. And you saw in that documentary, they showed the human error, and they talked about a lot of safety protocols where people look the other way, which sounds about right for Russia. Yeah. I feel like they look the other way on a lot of items. If we look the other way in the United States on a lot of shit, you know damn well the Russians are looking the other way. Lack of training. That's probably a big thing. People were just thrown in there like Homer Simpson. And they're just told, hey, if this gauge hits 100, press the red button.
Mm-hmm.
What about the other buttons? Just press the red button. So I think Chernobyl was probably in our lifetime, will probably be the biggest event until nuclear missiles are launched.
So here's the thing. So was the bombs in? And I'm not trying to say that it wasn't a horrible situation. That is not what I'm trying to portray here. I definitely think that the loss of human life was horrible, and it is a pivotal piece of human history that this happened. And I know that there's a lot of individuals that were affected by this, and I'm not discounting that, but all to say that, and let's really pick apart the decontamination efforts. There is a combination of natural processes where the decontamination just happens over time naturally, and then there's also some human efforts that you can actually be able to go through some certain processes to be able to kind of decontaminate things and stuff. But what's interesting about it is that there's a short half-life for the radioactive isotopes that were released by these atomic bombs. And these atomic bombs were made from iodine-131 and cesium-137. And they have a relative short half-life, and that's what that number means and stuff. I think
cesium is like 30 years.
Yeah, so there's a short decay period and stuff, and then there's also it's really rainy within Japan, so it's just raining all the time, and there's a lot of environmental factors when it comes to wind, rain, and all this other stuff to be able to wash that radioactive material or particles out of the soil and into more of spread it across the environment and stuff. And then there's also just some removal of debris that we can do as humans to be able to remove the debris and make it more inhabitable over time. And then some excavation efforts. But in terms of long-term monitoring, all we can do is just monitor the ground levels and ensure that they're not spiking in radioactive levels. But there's the explosions, as you were saying, were above ground. Again, I've already talked about how I just don't feel like that's the case, because if you look at some of the pictures and also the video from when, what is it, Fat Man, the bomb that was dropped over Hiroshima. When the explosion happened, you had the typical mushroom cloud. How is it that you have a mushroom cloud explosion if there wasn't a penetration of the ground itself, and there was a cratering that happened as well? I don't believe that it happened above ground. I just don't think that we had the technology.
I think it's technically above ground. I think if it hits the surface and explodes, that's considered above ground.
Yeah, because you have a kind of like a spring.
Yeah, it's just I think it's more of a technical.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Is the way when you break it down to the science aspect of it versus
Sure.
nuclear versus atomic. I think it's more technical than anything.
Yeah. Whereas like it's not like a bunker buster where it goes in the ground and then
Yeah.
it explodes while
And
it's
explodes up.
in the ground.
Correct.
I got you.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, you've seen there's all sorts of bombs. They have the implosion where it kind of pulls everything in, which that's got to suck. You have fire bombs. There's all sorts of these above grounds. But ultimately, going back into what we started this with, having a nuclear fallout, Armageddon, survival. When you talk about all these things, so Chernobyl is the perfect example. There was poor crisis management. The government did not tell anybody all the information. They evacuated all the people after they were exposed to it. If something like this were to happen today in the United States, we can't speak for other countries, but if something like this were to happen in the United States, whether it's a nuclear bomb or a nuclear facility failing, do you think we would handle it correctly in 2024 or 2025 properly, where we would evacuate people in time, or would we lose half of Florida and then evacuate? I'm curious. I don't know if we would get enough warning, if the government would be able to react properly. Because what do you do if a nuclear power plant fails and starts leaking radiation?
Well, have you heard about? Remember, was it 4 Mile Island or something like that, or 3 Mile Island or
3
something
Mile
like that?
Island, I think
3
it
Mile
is.
Island, yeah. So, did you hear about Google? Or was it Google or Microsoft? One of the two. I think it might have been Microsoft. Anyway, one of the two. They bought it to be able to power AI.
All right.
That's all
Sounds
it's
like
doing.
something Bill Gates would do.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, they bought the island to be able to restart the nuclear reactor to be able to provide enough energy to power AI.
But what if it failed? Would there be enough help for the people that are around it to survive?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I mean, if a nuclear missile was launched at Florida versus a nuclear facility failing, we, in theory, should have more than enough time to evacuate over with a nuclear missile being launched here from, let's say, our friends in Russia or our friends in North Korea. We should have enough time to evacuate the entire state. Well, maybe most of the state. I don't know. If you're in Miami, you're not getting out. You're going to have to get on a raft and go to Cuba.
I don't know.
You're going to go the other way.
If you think about hypersonic weapons nowadays that essentially are launched into the atmosphere and then are able to travel with the rotation of the Earth itself, like, I mean, you're talking about thousands of miles per hour in land speed, and then having it re-enter into the Earth as if it was basically like a space capsule and stuff, and then be able to create a nuclear impact that is far more more effective than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. All to say that, like, hypothetically speaking, you would be able to, for lack of better terms, be able to intercept the missile and be able to explode it like above the atmosphere. But wouldn't that be worse than an actual
But
ground
we can
penetration?
only stop 100 of them. We only have the technology up there to stop 100 missiles.
Sure.
So if Russia too has 1,500,
Well, I mean, you would
they
have
gotta
to.
launch all they got to do is launch 101.
You would have to launch all of them.
Yes.
And
And we're supposed to know, based upon everything we've been told, we have the ability to say Russia launched 1, 2, 3, 500 missiles, so that we can retaliate in that same time. And then what? It's a waiting game. All right, missile will be here in 1 hour and 45 minutes.
I don't even think that that's
Takes me
the
4
case.
hours to get to the Georgia line.
Dude, imagine. So, okay, all right, let's go
I'd
back.
have to know immediately.
So, let's think about the alien use case here. Let's say that we're able to, we or any kind of foreign nation is able to solve the gravitational problem, where it's you're able to essentially travel faster than the speed of light and be able to do it in a way where you're able to block signals or do it stealthy and be able to be it, from point A to point B within milliseconds, and then launch a nuclear munition and then go back. Like that is the ultimate technology there. So once that is a thing, I feel like there is a possibility that whoever it is that's able to figure this whole thing out is going to have the most powerful capability ever.
Yep.
And with that being said, I know we're about 30 minutes in, 35 minutes in.
The only thing I'm going to add to that, so
okay, all right,
bring it all back around. We
Okay.
talked about surviving in Armageddon.
okay,
If we ended up in a Fallout video game / Amazon series style event,
okay,
do we survive? We don't have vaults. We don't have silos.
not yet.
We have our little bunkers.
Yeah,
It could happen. If it happened now, does mankind survive? No.